I leaned back against the couch, letting out a deep sigh as Derek left for work. The tension in our apartment was thick enough to cut with a knife. His mother, Marjorie, had been staying with us for the past 2 weeks after a supposedly minor accident, and her presence was suffocating. "You two lovebirds have such a nice place," Marjorie said as she hobbled into the living room, her cane tapping loudly against the hardwood floor. "It's a shame you don't make better use of it." I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to snap back. Her constant jabs about starting a family were becoming unbearable. "We've talked about this, Marjorie," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Derek and I want to enjoy a few more years together before having kids." She let out a patronizing chuckle. "Oh, honey, at your age, you can't afford to wait too long. The clock is ticking, you know." I stood up abruptly, my patience wearing thin. "I appreciate your concern, but this is our decision. We'll have children when we're ready." Marjorie's eyes narrowed, and she took a step closer, her cane digging into the floor. "Don't forget, dear, I'm family, and family should always come first." Her words hung in the air like a thinly veiled threat, and I couldn't shake the feeling that her accident was just the beginning of something more sinister. Later that night, as Derek and I sat in uncomfortable silence over dinner, I couldn't help but wonder if her manipulative behavior would escalate. Little did I know, it was just the start of a twisted game that would test the very foundations of our marriage. The sound of shattering glass pierced the air, jolting me awake. I rushed into the kitchen to find Marjorie on the floor, clutching her ankle and surrounded by shards of a broken vase. "Oh my God, are you okay?" I exclaimed, crouching down beside her. I'm fine. She insisted through gritted teeth, "Just a little clumsy, that's all." As I helped her to her feet, she let out a pained cry and leaned heavily on me. "My ankle? I think it's sprained." Derek rushed in, his face etched with concern. "What happened?" "Your mother had a fall," I explained, struggling under Marjorie's weight. "We should take her to the hospital." Marjorie shook her head vehemently. "Nonsense, dear. I'll be fine once I get some rest." Over the next few days, Marjorie milked her supposed injury for all it was worth. She demanded constant attention and assistance, even for the simplest tasks. Derek doted on her hand and foot, while I grew increasingly resentful of her manipulative behavior. "Layla, could you bring me some water?" she called out from the living room one afternoon. I gritted my teeth, biting back a sharp retort. Instead, I plastered on a forced smile and carried a glass to her. "Thank you, dear," she said sweetly, now her eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite place. As the days turned into weeks, Marjorie's presence became increasingly intrusive. She would make snide comments about my career, implying that my focus on work was the reason we hadn't started a family yet. "A real woman would put her family first," she'd say, her words dripping with venom. Derek tried to reason with her, but she played the victim card, insisting that her only desire was to see us happy and fulfilled. I knew better, though. With each passing day, it became clearer that Marjorie's accident was nothing more than a ruse to worm her way into our lives and exert her control. The sickening scent of burnt food filled the air as I rushed into the kitchen to find smoke billowing from the oven. Marjorie stood by, a smug expression on her face. "Oh dear, it seems I've made a mess of things," she said, her tone dripping with false innocence. I quickly turned off the oven and opened the windows, trying to dissipate the acrid smoke. "What happened?" I demanded, glaring at her. "I was just trying to be helpful and bake some cookies for Derek," she replied, her eyes wide and guileless. "I must have gotten distracted." I knew better than to believe her feigned ignorance. This was just another ploy in her twisted game, a calculated move to undermine me in front of Derek. Sure enough, when he arrived home later that evening, the apartment still reeked of charred cookies. Marjorie played the victim perfectly, claiming she had simply wanted to do something nice, only to be met with my anger and ingratitude. Derek shot me a disapproving look, and I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. Didn't he see through her act? As the days passed, Marjorie's manipulations became more overt. She would leave messes around the apartment, then accuse me of being an inconsiderate host when I didn't clean up after her. "Honestly, Layla, I don't know how Derek puts up with your laziness," she'd say, shaking her head in mock disappointment. Derek, ever the dutiful son, would rush to her defense, chastising me for not being more understanding of her condition. The tension between us grew palpable, our once happy home now a battleground for Marjorie's machinations. I longed to confront her, to expose her lies and manipulations, but I knew she had Derek wrapped around her finger. One evening, as I was cleaning up after yet another of Marjorie's messes, I heard her voice from the other room, dripping with false sincerity. "Derek, dear, I'm so worried about Layla. She seems so stressed and unhappy lately. I can't help but wonder if she's really ready for the responsibilities of motherhood." My heart raced as I crept down the hallway, drawn by the sound of Marjorie's voice. I peered around the corner to see her pacing back and forth, her cane abandoned against the wall. "You're such a convincing little actress, aren't you?" I spat, anger coursing through my veins. Marjorie whirled around, her eyes wide with feigned surprise. "Layla, I was just stretching my legs." "Cut the crap, Marjorie," I snarled. "I know you've been faking this whole injury from the start." Her mask of innocence slipped, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. "You have no proof. I just saw you walking without your cane," I countered. "How much longer did you plan on stringing us along with this charade?" Marjorie's lips curled into a cruel smile. "As long as it took to get what I want." "And what's that?" I demanded, my fists clenched at my sides. "Grandchildren, of course," she replied, as if it should have been obvious. "Derek and I deserve to have our family line continue, and you're the one standing in the way of that." I scoffed in disbelief. "So you've been manipulating us this whole time, just to pressure us into having kids?" "Whatever it takes," Marjorie hissed, her eyes glinting with determination. "I'll do whatever it takes to ensure my son's happiness and our family's legacy." My blood boiled as the full extent of her deceit became clear. "You're a monster," I spat. "How could you lie and scheme like this, even to your own son?" Marjorie shrugged, unfazed. "He'll understand eventually. Once you've given him the grandchildren he deserves, he'll see that I was right all along." I shook my head in disgust. "You're delusional. Derek would never forgive you for this betrayal." Marjorie's expression darkened, her voice low and menacing. "Then I'll just have to make sure he never finds out the truth. One way or another, I'll get what I want." As she turned and hobbled away, clutching her cane once more, a chill ran down my spine. Her ultimatum hung in the air, a stark reminder that this was far from over. The sound of Derek's footsteps echoed in the hallway, and I braced myself for another confrontation. Marjorie had been laying the groundwork all day, making snide comments about my work schedule and implying that I was neglecting my wifely duties. "Layla, we need to talk," Derek said as he entered the living room, his brow furrowed with concern. I steeled myself, already knowing where this was headed. "What's going on?" Derek sank into the armchair, his shoulders heavy with tension. "It's my mother. She's worried that you've been distracted lately." I fought back a bitter laugh. "Distracted? Is that what she's calling it?" "She thinks you might be having an affair," he blurted out, his eyes searching mine for any hint of deceit. The accusation hit me like a physical blow, and I recoiled in disbelief. "What? That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Derek pressed, his voice tinged with doubt. "You've been working late, taking a lot of calls in private." I shook my head vehemently. "Those were work calls, Derek. You know how important this project is for my career." He ran a hand through his hair, his expression pained. "I want to believe you, Layla, but my mother seems convinced, and she's been acting so erratic lately." Realization dawned on me, and I felt sick to my stomach. Marjorie had been setting me up this whole time, planting seeds of doubt and mistrust in Derek's mind. "Don't you see what she's doing?" I pleaded. "She's been manipulating us from the start, trying to drive a wedge between us." Derek's eyes widened, and I could see the conflict raging within him. I don't know what to believe anymore." Tears of frustration stung my eyes as I realized the extent of Marjorie's treachery. She had succeeded in sowing discord between us, and now Derek was questioning everything we had built together. As he stormed out of the room, I sank onto the couch, my heart heavy with despair. Marjorie had won this battle, but I refused to let her win the war. It was time to fight back and expose her lies, no matter the cost. The sound of Derek's car pulling out of the driveway filled me with a sense of grim determination. As soon as he was gone for work, I sprang into action, my resolve to expose Marjorie's deceit stronger than ever. First, I scoured the apartment, searching for any evidence of her manipulations. In the back of her closet, I found a stash of documents detailing her financial assets and investments, assets that had grown substantially since she'd been living with us and taking advantage of our generosity. Next, I reached out to the building's security office and requested copies of the surveillance footage from the past few weeks. Hours of painstaking review followed, but finally I struck gold. Clear video evidence of Marjorie walking without her cane, her supposed injury, nothing more than an act. Armed with this damning proof, I began compiling a meticulous record of her lies and schemes, cross-referencing dates and times to build an airtight case against her. With each piece of evidence I uncovered, my anger burned hotter, fueled by the realization of how deeply she had betrayed our trust. As the days passed, I worked tirelessly, determined to leave no stone unturned. Marjorie maintained her facade of helplessness, oblivious to the fact that her web of deceit was unraveling around her. One evening, as I was reviewing the security footage once again, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Working late again, I see." I whirled around to find Derek standing in the doorway, his expression a mix of hurt and confusion. "Derek," I breathed, my heart racing. "I can explain." Before I could say another word, he held up his hand, his eyes pleading with me. "Please, Layla, just tell me the truth. Are you having an affair?" In that moment, I knew this was my chance to finally lay bare Marjorie's machinations. Without hesitation, I wordlessly played the video footage, showing his mother walking without aid, her injury a sham from the very beginning. Derek's face drained of color as he watched the undeniable evidence unfold before his eyes. What is all this?" "The proof of your mother's lies," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "She's been manipulating us this whole time, trying to force us into having a child we're not ready for." The tension in the air was thick as we gathered for our monthly family dinner. Derek had agreed to confront his mother about her lies, but the weight of what we were about to do hung heavy over us. As everyone settled around the table, Marjorie waltzed in, her cane tapping against the hardwood floor. "There's my favorite son," she cooed, leaning in to kiss Derek's cheek. I felt my jaw clench as she shot me a sickly sweet smile. "Layla, dear, you're looking well." "Cut the act." "Marjorie," I snapped, unable to hold back any longer. "We know everything." Her eyes widened in mock surprise. "Why, whatever do you mean?" Derek cleared his throat, his expression stern. "The lies, Mom, the faked injury, the manipulations, it all stops now." Marjorie's facade crumbled, and she let out a haughty laugh. "Oh, please. I was just trying to help you two see reason." "By lying and scheming behind our backs?" I countered, my voice rising. "By trying to turn Derek against me?" She shrugged, unrepentant. "Sometimes a little tough love is necessary, especially when dealing with such stubborn children." Derek slammed his fist on the table, making everyone jump. "That's enough, Mom. We have proof of everything. The faked injury, the financial records showing how you've been bleeding us dry." As he played the security footage, Marjorie's expression hardened. "So what?" she spat. "I did what I had to do to protect this family's legacy. By destroying our marriage?" I cried, tears of anger and betrayal stinging my eyes. Marjorie rounded on me, her voice dripping with venom. "You're the one standing in the way of Derek's happiness. If you really loved him, you'd give him the children he deserves." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Derek's face was pale, his eyes filled with a mix of shame and disbelief. Finally, he spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "Mom, what you've done, it's unforgivable." Marjorie's mouth fell open in shock, but before she could respond, Derek barreled on. "You lied to us, manipulated us, tried to ruin our marriage, all for your own selfish desires. Well, it stops here. We're cutting you off, financially and personally, until you can prove you actually respect our boundaries and decisions." As the full weight of his words sank in, Marjorie's face contorted with rage. But for once she had no retort, no scathing comeback. She simply gathered her things and stormed out, the echo of her cane fading into silence. The weight of Marjorie's absence felt like a burden lifted from our shoulders. Derek and I could finally breathe again, free from her toxic manipulation and lies. In the weeks that followed, we worked tirelessly to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. It wasn't easy. The scars of her betrayal ran deep. But with each honest conversation, each shared vulnerability, we grew closer than ever before. Marjorie, on the other hand, was left to confront the harsh consequences of her actions. Without our financial support, she was forced to downsize, trading her lavish lifestyle for a modest apartment on the outskirts of town. I'll never forget the day we stopped by unannounced, hoping to find her humbled, ready to apologize and make amends. Instead, we were met with the same defiant glare that had become so painfully familiar. "Well, if it isn't the happy couple," she sneered as she opened the door. "Come to gloat, have you?" Derek's jaw clenched, but he remained calm. "We're here to give you one last chance, Mom. Apologize, truly apologize, and we can start to move forward." Marjorie scoffed, her eyes flashing with defiance. "Apologize for what? For trying to give you the family you deserve?" I shook my head in disbelief. "Even now, you refuse to see how wrong you were." "Wrong?" she spat. "I was just trying to protect our family's legacy. But clearly you two are too selfish to understand what that means." As her words hung in the air, I realized that she was truly beyond redemption. The once vibrant, manipulative woman before us had been reduced to a bitter, lonely shell of herself. We left without another word, and as we drove away, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sorrow mixed with relief. Marjorie had brought this upon herself, and now she would have to live with the consequences of her actions. In the months that followed, Derek and I focused on rebuilding our lives on our own terms. We made plans for the future, dreams that didn't involve Marjorie's toxic influence. And when the time was finally right, when we were both ready, we welcomed our first child into the world, a symbol of our love and resilience, untainted by the shadows of Marjorie's twisted desires. As for Marjorie, the last I heard, she had faded into a lonely existence, cut off from the family she had once sought to control. A harsh punishment, perhaps, but one that she had brought upon herself through her own selfish actions.